For the last year, I've been in my crystal growing phase, and I heard that if you take an egg and save the shell after cooking it, you can grow your own crystals. I didn't see how that could be true, so after I cooked my egg, I saved the shell, wiped down the inside with a paper towel, gave it a little crack, and I carefully started to peel the outer layer of shell off of the membrane. You can see the shells came right off, and honestly, it was quite oddly satisfying to get the membrane off of the shell. I kept gently peeling until my egg membrane looked like this and the shells were completely removed. You can see the membrane is actually quite durable. I stretched it and pulled it a bit, but there was no breakage. Then I took the other eggshell and this time I tried removing the membrane before the shells. One piece came right off and then another until my egg had no stretchy membrane inside it anymore. So both ways ended up working quite well. So satisfying. Then I got a little cup and started crushing my eggshells into very small pieces inside the little container just until it looked something like this. You gotta make sure to crush them up very small, about 1 to 2 centimeters in size, so you can increase the surface area, and that will allow the vinegar to dissolve more of the calcium carbonate. Then, arguably the most important part, I got some vinegar and poured some inside the little cup just until there was a layer covering all of the eggshells. You want to make sure to completely cover the eggshells. And now it was time to actually dissolve the eggshells. You can see that you get to watch a little reaction take place. It'll fizz and bubble up as the acetic acid in the vinegar reacts with the calcium carbonate in the eggshells, and this chemical reaction forms calcium acetate, carbon dioxide, and water. And once the bubbling slows down, comes the hardest part. You gotta let it sit for 1 week. Yes, 7 whole days on the counter until the vinegar fully evaporates. It's this evaporation process that makes your actual tiny crystals form, so the longer you wait, the better. You want the vinegar to fully dissolve the calcium carbonate, and when it does, after about 4 days, you'll start to see the eggshells begin to gradually break down and the crystals begin to grow. The vinegar evaporates and little white crystals start to form around the eggshells, which is otherwise known as calcium carbonate crystals. As the liquid evaporates, the dissolved calcium acetate will reform into calcium carbonate as the solution becomes oversaturated, and you'll see white crystals form around the eggshell pieces. Placing a dish near a fan can help speed up the evaporation process, or you can just let nature do its thing like I did. This was the moment I kinda regretted not adding food coloring to my crystal, but that just means we'll have to try this again. And soon, before I knew it, 7 days had finally passed and my crystals were ready. I started admiring them up close and personal, really confused how this actually worked. And this was the moment I wanted to know what the structures of these crystals really looked like up close and personal. So I got my microscope out, placed a tiny piece of crystal on a little dish, and started to closely inspect what they looked like. You can see there were small white powdery crystals growing on the eggshell fragments. Some pieces were bigger than others, and it was kind of hard to get a really good focus on the crystals, but it was so cool to know that from a simple eggshell grew these awesome crystals. And as soon as I finished my experiment, I set the crystals aside to let them dry completely so I could save them and store them in a small display jar. But that's also when I learned that you can apparently use the solution before the crystals grow as a plant fertilizer. And that's because there's a ton of calcium in eggshells, but it's actually trapped within the eggshells itself. So if you crush up some eggshells and pour vinegar over top, you'll separate the calcium, and it's the vinegar that helps separate the calcium from the shell. It produces carbon dioxide, and separating the calcium is actually really beneficial for your plants when you dilute it in water. I wanted to try this on my indoor plants because just like human bones need calcium, so do my plants. So I took another egg, removed the membrane, added my shells to a little cup, and crushed them up even more. And once it looked a little something like this, and the membrane looked like this, I took some vinegar, poured an even layer over top of the shells just like before, but instead of growing crystals, this time we were gonna make plant fertilizer. I watched my favorite part happen, the reaction. It started to bubble up and create a bit of a thicker layer over top. After about an hour, I noticed that my solution stopped bubbling as much, and that's when I knew the calcium was separated from the shell. And so I grabbed a spoon and scooped the top layer of film off. It's this top layer that is water-soluble calcium eggshell fertilizer that you can dilute in a gallon or so of water and then spray on your indoor plants. What this will do, amongst other things, is help prevent crops and certain plants from overgrowing. It can increase longevity and hardiness of fruits, and overall just provide proper nutrition and absorption that your plants may be lacking. So I think I'm gonna stay in my crystal growing phase for a little while longer and try this again, but with food coloring and more eggs and maybe some apple cider vinegar. But if there is one thing that I know for sure, it's that it's definitely worth it to wait 7 days to grow your own crystals from your breakfast eggs.